The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood. It is Tuesday the 29th of October and it is 10 o'clock. I hope you have had a lovely morning so far. It's a little bit nippy, chilly out there, but as long as you're wrapped up warm, that is the main thing. We are going to head over straight to a song called Bada Dushman Bana Phirta Hai. Enjoy. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. It is just past 10 o'clock on Tuesday the 29th of October. My name is Imrana and that nasheed was Bada Dushman Bana Phirta Hai Jo Bachon Se Ladta Hai, and there was a reason that I put that song on, and the reason being that it's directly related to the book that we are going to be discussing today, which is called Amal, Unbound by Aisha Saeed. And basically this book has been inspired by the story of Malala Yousafzai, and even as you heard in the song that I just played, which was actually made in response to an attack on some children by the Taliban, and which is directly related really to also the story of Malala Yousafzai. And we know that kind of the, I guess, atrocities that do occur across the world towards, I guess, young people, but more specifically, this idea of education and how really important that is, and how somebody like Malala, who obviously kind of stood her ground in terms of wanting the empowerment of young people, but more specifically young women. And this book we are discussing today, Amal, Unbound, by Aisha Saeed. I'm just going to start by reading the blurb at the back to give you a bit of introduction. So the strapline is, "If everyone decided nothing could change, nothing ever would." Amal loves learning and dreams of becoming a teacher. Then something unimaginable happens. After an accidental run-in with the son of her village's corrupt landlord, she is forced to be his mother's servant in order to pay off her own family's debt. At the opulent and corrupt Khan estate, Amal realizes that she will have to find a way to work with others to bring about change and to achieve her dreams. So then it just ends by saying, inspired by Malala Yousafzai, Amal Unbound is a heartwarming story for brave girls everywhere. So reading this book, I mean, I was really kind of inspired, I think, by the story. I think it's an important story actually to write in the current social-political climate as well, because just generally education is important. And myself as a teacher, you know, I kind of, I guess, value that from both ends, as a teacher and also as a parent, and I guess as a Muslim woman of colour, again, it's these things that I know, or I'm aware of the barriers that exist, and when I think about my daughters, I actually think about the blessing of just being able to go to school and have an education, but then also being critical enough to be able to think about the education system and the politics at play, and all those things are really important to talk about. So I'm really excited today to be joined in the studio by four lovely young women who are going to be discussing this book with me, called Amal Unbound by Aisha Saeed. So we are joined today by Zoya, Iman, Hannah and Sarah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
How are you all this morning?
Good.
Good. I know it's a bit early, but we will pick up soon. So I guess my first question to you would be, let's start with the easy one. Why do you think the author called this her novel Amal Unbound? Who wants to go first? Zoya.
I think it's because unbound means free.
Okay.
And the book's about Amal being a servant and then being free. So, which means the title is saying Amal is free.
Okay, so you kind of think it's directly linked to the idea of freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, so being unbound by something, because obviously the opposite would be to be bound and to be constrained. Yeah. Okay, cool, interesting. Iman, you were going to say something.
Okay. I think it means that you know how it's kind of like what Zoya said about her being free. So how she wants to be free a lot, and she's trying to escape from the Jawad Sahib's estate.
Yes, that's right.
And
so do you want to talk a little bit about actually what happens? So how does she end up in this book into a situation where she's actually feeling she's bound?
So one day she goes to the shops to buy something for herself, because she has they're not very rich in there where she lives, and she wants to buy something for herself, not to share with anyone, just to keep for herself as a thing of hope. It could be the thing, she thinks that it's the thing that can bring her some, she says it's the pomegranate of hope, and she buys the pomegranate, and then she nearly gets run over by Jawad Sahib's car, and then so basically he comes out and he asks her, "Can I have that pomegranate, please, kindly?" And she's like, no. She doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know he's the ruler of her
kind of in the village. He's
in the village.
Yeah.
And then so then after he asks nicely, and then he says it more, and then everyone around her is like shocked. They're like, how are you saying this? You're going to get in big trouble. But then basically...
So she ends up in a situation where she's kind of done something to challenge his authority, and he's obviously not like that. So then what ends up happening? How does she then end up in a situation where she's now kind of bound, or she hasn't got freedom?
Okay, so the Khan Sahib, he comes back to their house, and now he's saying, because she, like you said, challenged his authority and embarrassed him in front of loads of people, he's not really used to people standing up to him. He's more used to people just doing what he says to do and when he says to do it. So he goes back to her house, and he says to her family they have 3 days to decide what they want to do. So he says he wants Amal to come with him as his mother's servant, and he says to them, you have 3 days to decide, otherwise there's going to be a bigger consequence than me taking your daughter away from you, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then in terms of the title, so it's Amal Unbound by Aisha Saeed. So now what is the link here then to the idea of education then? Zoe, do you want to come back into that? So how, in terms of Amal as a character, what was her relationship towards education in school?
She really liked education. She really liked learning. She really liked reading. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. So education was really important to her. And when she had to go and be a servant, she wasn't allowed to go to school and learn, and that was hard for her. Yeah, exactly. And she faced all of these problems of not being able to do stuff that she wanted. She couldn't really see her family. She had to stay there. Yeah.
And what do you think, what are kind of your feelings and towards this idea that just because she stood up to somebody, she now ends up kind of as a bargaining kind of tool between, in terms of this debt? I mean, how did that make you feel in terms of that situation?
I didn't really feel that was right. I felt like if she stood up, it was probably because something was wrong or she didn't want to. And I don't think she should have been forced to do something that she shouldn't have, that she didn't need to do.
No, exactly. Okay. And so then in terms of, there's a quote in the book, and it says, you always have a choice. Making choices, even when they scare you, because you know it's the right thing to do, that's bravery. So do you think, Iman, that Amal was brave in the decisions that she made then?
She was really brave, that she stood up. If she wasn't that kind of brave, then she would have just gave it and just winced away, went away, and but I'm pretty sure this was challenging for her. But she just knew this isn't right. This is theft. It's crime in my country. There shouldn't be this. These people are asking for things. I'm not going to give it. I'm going to be brave. I'm just going to go away. I'm just going to let him leave, and then I will.
Yeah. So just to then play devil's advocate for the moment, I mean, could it be fair to say that as a young person, she was just being a bit rash? She just thought, no, that this is mine. She was being a bit selfish. Just thought, no, I'm not going to give it just because he's asked. I mean, was there an element of that, or do you think, no, it was really... She was just...
No, it was actually... she was... throughout the story, I could tell that she was mature. She knew what she was doing. She was helping her mum. She was the eldest, so I'm pretty sure she knew what she was doing. She didn't just say that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's quite probably an important point. I think many of us, I mean, I'm the eldest in my family. Are you the eldest, Iman, in your family?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we could probably relate to this idea of having a sense of responsibility sometimes. So the idea of, perhaps she was kind of mature already for her age, and she was able to make decisions which were kind of really thought out about. So yeah, maybe you're right. So maybe in that situation of him demanding the pomegranate, she made a conscious choice actually that was going to be to challenge that. Yeah.
Yeah, we all kind of relate to being the eldest because
Yeah.
all of us in the room are. But
Are you all the eldest here? Cool. That's solidarity. Oh, I feel so good.
and
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we all realise how hard it must be. We have more responsibilities.
Yeah.
So I think me myself, I kind of relate to Amal in that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Does anybody else relate to Amal in any way? Yeah, go on. Sarah.
It kind of depends on how many siblings you have. Like, because Amal has 2 younger sisters and she has a newborn sister now.
Yeah.
So she has quite a lot of younger siblings under her looking up to her. So she has to be quite a big role model for them.
Yeah.
And so if you're only the elder sibling of one younger child, then you kind of don't feel as pressured to be the responsibility. But the
Okay.
more people looking up to you, the more pressured you feel to show them a good example.
That's really, really interesting, actually. I mean, I'm the eldest of 4, but yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if maybe if I had less, would I feel less pressured? I don't know. What do you think, Hannah, about that? As you're also the eldest, but do you sometimes feel that actually there is a kind of a pressure responsibility, or sometimes,
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, and how do you think? Is that something you kind of like thrive on? Do you think, I really like actually being held responsible? Or do you think sometimes it can be a bit hard?
Yeah, sometimes it can be pretty hard, like showing him like behaviours.
Yeah.
And
Just being like a role model, but that's interesting. And then I'm glad actually we're kind of talking a little bit about how maybe we could potentially relate to somebody like Amal, because definitely I think she's a strong, kind of headstrong character, and obviously that's part of the reason why this pomegranate of hope, like you mentioned, Iman, becomes kind of a key point in her life. But so you mentioned, Sarah, the idea that she's got 2 younger sisters, and that is another kind of theme that they touch upon, the author touches upon in this story, that when her baby sister is born, the reaction of her parents and those of the community. So do you want to talk a little bit about what reaction she witnessed to that, and then maybe we can expand on that as well?
Okay, so when Amal's mum was pregnant with her youngest sister, everyone expected it to be a boy, because they were saying things like these old superstitions like back pains mean a boy and all of those things. And so when her mum had the baby and it was a girl, Amal saw that her parents was a bit depressed, and she in her head she kind of linked it to the fact that it was a girl and not a boy, and she thought her mum and dad were really upset about that. And then she saw the reactions of her mum's friends and how disappointed they were when they came round and they saw it was a girl and not a boy. So,
yeah, exactly. And so there's another quote then in the book, so where she says, "Sometimes I wish I did not pay such careful attention. Maybe then I would not have learned that they thought being a girl was such a bad thing." Why do you think, Zoya, that in certain communities, because even now we have this mentality that if you give birth to a boy, it's not as good, or it's a bit disappointing? What do you think fuels that? What's the reason behind it?
Well, in some countries they think that boys are because boys are stronger than girls in some ways.
Sure.
They can help with the farming, whereas girls, if I have girls, and say if you had a girl, okay, she can just help with the cooking or the cleaning.
Sure.
Whereas if you have a boy, it's like, come on, let's do the farming.
Sure.
And it's a bit, you feel, if you were a parent there, you would feel like the boy was better than the girl.
Sure. Okay. Do you think that can be justified in any situation, that kind of opinion about boys and girls?
I think they're all equal.
Okay.
I think those girls whose families want a boy and think that boys are better than girls, I think they should prove that, like show their families what they can do.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And again, I think it comes back to that then responsibility, I guess, sometimes on young women to have to prove ourselves, even, I guess, to our families. I mean, I take your point, because I think, like you said, in certain communities, certain cultures, there might there might be that kind of pressure in terms of finances, because when you are living in maybe, you know, poverty, or in situations where you really need income coming in. But then in those situations, how do you think, Iman, in those situations where people are in kind of dire kind of situations, and they feel that actually, no, but we want a son so they can help bring income in, or they can, you know, work the land. In those situations, though, how can we use education to change that mindset, do you think? Or can we even?
By using education, that proves that if education, for the first thing, if education is being taught in the same ways, like if they're both learning the same things, that proves that both of them can do the same things.
Okay, sure.
And both genders are equal and education can prove that, because if you learn and you like pass a test, then when you pass the test, then it's kind of like when you survive a war, and it's kind of like
that's a really,
winning something. And when both genders can both accomplish that, then it proves to their parents and family and their teachers that they both can do the same things.
Sure.
And that they both have, neither of them are different in any way. They just have may have differences, but in
so it's kind of like
generally,
So there's like a sense of achievement, which is kind of regardless of what gender you are. You wanted to say something, Sarah?
It was just that in some cultures, it's not only girls that are pushed back to say no, you can't go and take an education. Like even in the story, it was saying about this. There was this man and he was a teacher, but his family didn't want him to be a teacher because they thought that wasn't a job for men to do. That was more of a woman's job. So they wanted him to go into law, and he said, no, I want to be a teacher. So he strove to be a teacher, even though his family were like, no, you can't do it.
And I think actually that's such an important thing that, you know, you've kind of shone a light on, actually, because it's true, because the author, I think, does a really good job in bringing up those both kind of situations, that even there's a male character who also had a challenge of being a teacher. I mean, I guess it's something I can relate to, in the sense that when I became a teacher, I know it's something that my mum especially, I think, was very kind of pleased and really proud of. But, you know, but for me, it was about unpicking that. I think this idea of being an educator is something which is obviously highly, you know, alhamdulillah, it's something I think is a blessing to be able to be in a situation where you can educate others. And I use the term educate quite loosely here. But, you know, by the same token, I know it was also very gendered, in the sense that, you know, a lot of people I've come across say, oh, yeah, teaching's such a good job for a woman because you can take time off in the holidays and you can do this, that, other. So even that, you just think, well, is that why I want to become a teacher? Just so then I'm going to be a mother and it'll be easy? That surely, you know, we need to value the role of a teacher in and of itself, as opposed to then what, you know, benefits there might be. So that's, I guess, another interesting question. So then coming to like what we were saying, the situation that Amal ends up in, where she becomes a servant of Jawad Sahib, is it? His mother. So then she's obviously now got no access to education, and she's obviously really, really upset about that. Her parents are also her mother, you know, obviously they're also kind of upset at the loss that their daughter's going to feel, but this idea of having to be in debt and pay debt, you know, to Jawad Sahib. But what does she then do while she's there? Because then she discovers there's a library at this house, and then there's a quote from the book says, without books, what was there to look forward to? So I guess my question to you would be that in that situation where she is now bound and she's got a lack of freedom, to what extent is reading a kind of a form of escapism, do you think? Sorry if I come to you.
Well, if you were stuck there as a servant and you were allowed to read and you actually like reading, then it does feel like you can go into a different place, forget about all your worries whilst you're reading. And because Amal, like everyone else who loves reading, she likes finding out about these new places or like just imagining stuff. Yeah. It means that she can do that whilst she's still being a servant. Yeah, sure. And she still has some good things that she can do whilst she's facing the problems. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think, you know, in that situation, it definitely is a form of escapism for her. And I think generally, obviously, being on the book club show, the idea just generally that sometimes reading in itself is kind of freeing that imagination. You're having the opportunity to kind of utilize it and not necessarily always just get away from problems, but just even for pleasure as well. But obviously her situation is slightly different, where she's gaining pleasure from reading, but at the same time is helping her escape the kind of cage, I guess, that she's now inside, which is obviously quite unfortunate. So we are heading over to a break shortly. Today we are discussing Amal, Unbound by Aisha Saeed. So grab yourselves a cup of tea and we will see you back in a few moments. Assalamu alaikum.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Book Club Show, Inspire 105.1 FM. It's 10:30 on Tuesday, the 29th of October. I hope you managed to grab yourselves a cup of tea or coffee. Today we are discussing Amal, Unbound by Aisha Saeed. And the strapline is, if everyone decided nothing could change, nothing ever would. We were talking before the break actually about the importance of generally reading, but how it can, depending on what situation you are in, be obviously something for pleasure, but also maybe a form of escapism. So we're going to continue that discussion with my special guests this morning, who are Zoya, Iman, Hannah and Sarah. But before that, what I want you to do is, if you are watching on Facebook Live, show you the absolutely gorgeous cover of the book, which is designed by Shehzal Malik, who is a Pakistani illustrator, and it's basically, for those of you who obviously aren't on Facebook and are listening, the two hands which are together, almost in the form of kind of when we do a dua almost, and there's lovely henna, there's sun rays, there's birds, there's clouds, and there's roses, and also the thorns which are wrapped around the arms of these two hands. And actually it's a really beautiful illustration, and actually in my opinion it really captures the essence of the story, this idea that there's parts of us that sometimes are bound and we are, I guess, on a constant search for freedom. But at the same time, the beauty that comes with the sense of freedom, actually. And, you know, when we think about birds, I mean, for me, that automatically kind of conjures images of freedom, being able to kind of just fly and be high up, I guess, and just free from the world, which is, I think, a beautiful way, a metaphor maybe of thinking about freedom. So as I said, just before the break, we were talking about books being a form of escapism. So I was just going to come to Hannah to talk a little bit about, what do you feel then with Amal in terms of her wanting to read a book, and what is that giving her in her situation?
Yeah, it's like a stress reliever for her, like to read, and it's like a stress reliever for her to like read and like so she's like thinking about something else apart from like being in the state of Jawad Sahib, so she can like get away from it and Yeah, exactly. So kind of a stress reliever as well. And did anyone else want to come into that? So, Sarah, during the break, you were just mentioning that obviously even before she ends up in the situation where she's now the servant, she was reading books. So what is the difference between her situation before and after then?
So even before she was reading books, like I said, a lot. And she was begging her friend Omar as well to bring more books from the boys' classroom, because she said in the girls' classroom there's hardly any books, and she's read all of them. So and she really liked poetry a lot. That was one of her favourite types of reading.
Yeah.
Also, the reading for her now as a slave, it's hard because she has to do it in secret as one of the things, and two, because it reminds her a lot of her old life and how free and able she was to do a simple thing like reading.
Yeah.
Wasn't actually a chore or something she had to do in secret.
Yeah, exactly. And Iman, you wanting to add something?
Okay. So, according, like, when we're talking about reading, for me, reading just takes me into a different person's body, which is kind of like Amal, how when you're reading, she was probably not thinking about her own life. She was just thinking about the other person's life in the story, or if it's about the animal, or if it's just about freedom. She was just would think about freedom. So in terms of that, I relate to her in that way, that how sometimes you feel like you're wrapped up in work and you have to do all these things, and you're busy, and then on your break, when you have free time, you just read a book, and it's like Hannah said, it's a stress reliever. So it just takes all your stress away from you. It's like you forgot you got memory loss, and you lost your memory, and so yeah, it just takes you somewhere else. You don't have to think about your worries and problems and your P's and Q's. You just you don't think about that anymore. You just think about the book. You just don't even think you're reading a book. It just makes a picture in your mind about what it is, what it's about, and then it comes into your mind, and
so we basically just get transported into a different world, which I think is really beautiful. For anyone who's listening and maybe watching on Facebook, if you don't read, I mean, that there is a perfect reason to actually start reading and starting making time to read, because it's not even just about escapism, but just generally about the pleasure that you can get from reading somebody else's story and reading the words on the page. There's something really magical about that. Now, what happens to Amal in this book is that she ends up, obviously, as we said, she ends up as a servant of Jawad Sahib's mother, where she's literally, doing things like making her tea or making her food or combing her hair, and, all the kind of things that maybe some servants need to do. Now, there's another character in the book, if I remember correctly, is this a younger girl called Fatima, who she ends up teaching, because Fatima is really keen to learn to read, and because Amal is somebody who's obviously always enjoyed learning, she actually then almost takes on the responsibility to teach this younger person. Now, one of the quotes from the book says that here we go. But at least by teaching her to read, I gave her a window to see worlds beyond ours, and a chance to imagine leaving the walls of this estate and to feel free, even if it was only for a little while. So my question then, Zoe, if I come to you, do you think that some young people take education for granted?
Yeah, like sometimes you go to your cousin's house and they'll say, I have to go to school tomorrow, it's really boring, because they don't know that this education will help them help their family when they grow up, become a doctor, earn money, and they don't know that that there's other children in different countries that actually do want to go to school, but they can't. Yeah, exactly. And not knowing this means, like, some children actually, like, abuse their education. They don't listen, they just play. Yeah. And it's not like loads of students do that, but there are some that do that. Sure.
Hannah, how about, do you agree with that? Do you think there are young people who just take their education for granted?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and what do you think? What is it that they're taking for granted exactly, and how does that compare to your own kind of maybe experience of education? So, I mean, do you, or does someone want to help Hannah out?
They think that education is just boring, and they don't realize that it's going to help them in their life. They're just like, oh, we have to go to school, we have to learn at home if they're homeschooled, or we have to have all these teachers. It's so boring. It's not really a thing that we need. I don't need maths, I don't need English, I don't need history, I don't need science. And they might only like one subject or two subjects, or maybe not even any subjects, but they just ignore their education, and when they get home they don't finish the homework. They just sit down and they're like, school's over, I don't need this thing and then these things, and then when it comes to all their tests, then if they pass it, that's just from learning, but that's not from memories. It's from learning, but they don't enjoy learning. They don't realise how much it's good for them. They don't realise that if you want to work as Zoya was saying, if you want to work as a doctor, they don't realise they need science or maths or anything.
So do you think that's kind of general with a lot of young people? Because you're, as a young person yourself, I mean, what is your kind of attitude, I guess, towards your education? Do you fall into that trap, or would you say you're...
Sometimes I do fall into that, but I do enjoy a few subjects, while I do not enjoy most, like science and maths.
You can't say you don't enjoy science. Why? I'm a science teacher, you should be careful.
I like experiments.
Okay, that's good. But yeah, no, I get that. And I think, to be honest, it's not even just young people. I think there's probably, as human beings, the flaws in us that we take a lot of things for granted sometimes, especially when it's freely available, even more so than we just think, oh, well, we because we haven't experienced the loss of something. And obviously, we obviously don't want always to experience loss, because obviously it's a negative thing. But whereas I think that's what's so interesting about Amal, because she has access to the education where she's got the aspiration to be a teacher. And I guess it's only through her loss that she suddenly comes to value, I guess, education even more. Do you want to say anything about that, Sarah?
It's more about in countries like England, we don't have to pay to get an education. To get an education, it's free for us. It's kind of the same with doctors, like to go to the doctors or the hospital, it's free. So we value those things more than we value those. We don't value those things enough. We take them for granted, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, to be honest, another kind of conversation to have, because obviously things are free to a certain point in terms of education, but then obviously if you want to go now to university, there's obviously fees to pay, and if you go to private school, which supposedly obviously has better education, and it becomes a problem with, I guess, accessibility, especially if you're from a working class background. But obviously that's probably a slightly different conversation to have. So coming back to maybe another quote from the book, there's one bit here where Amal is having a conversation with her mother. So it says, her mother says to her, "You will get married one day, then you'll belong to a new family. But I'm part of this family. I wish it wasn't this way, but this is how the world works. It doesn't mean I don't love my daughters. I love each and every one of you." So now that conversation between Amal and her mum, how does that make you feel about the status of kind of girls and women, do you think? Should we go to Iman?
So in some places, as women or girls, when you get married in some places, if you're a man, then you stay in your family. Your wife comes to live with you, but then in terms of being a woman, getting married, then what it is like, if you get married, you have to move to a different family. You can't, and then being a woman, you can't see your family as much. You have to have permission from your husband or your new family to go and visit your
own family.
Your own family.
Do you think that's okay? Do you think that's
it isn't very good, because if your mum needs your help, or your mum's not well, she's dying, or your siblings are sick, or anything really, then in terms of that, it's kind of you don't want to just go and then never see your mum again, and then she dies or she gets really sick and she has to stay in a hospital. Then in terms of being in those countries, I wouldn't really want to live there.
Sure. I mean, and the thing is, I know we're kind of talking a little bit about, other countries, but we know obviously these issues even happen in the UK in certain communities, and it's not even just South Asia. I mean, it's literally across communities where as soon as we start talking about in-laws and getting married, these issues crop up. But do you think, Sarah, that, but should it be in a situation that, we only, once we're married, that this notion of then we now belong to this, like our husband's family and our own family now is somehow like redundant? I mean, what can we challenge this mentality, do you think?
Yeah, I think you can. It's another thing, like the family name. You're expected to take your husband's name as soon as you get married and all of. And no, I don't think. I think it's kind of the way those people think, and it's what they've been generation from generation. It's been instilled in them. So sometimes it's hard to break that kind of mentality, but. Especially since if the society around you encourages that and thinks that the life goals of a woman is to get married and working and all of those things are just extras that can happen, then it's really hard to break the mentality. It's near impossible, basically. It's challenging.
And I think it's important that you said it's generation by generation, so it is kind of a systematic kind of notion that we're constantly having to kind of, I guess, challenge. But again, this idea that actually as women, if, like you said, that the aspiration for girls is always that, you're going to get married and then you're going to go into this family, and we don't then talk about actually what does it mean also from the boy's side or the husband's side. And actually what you're doing is you're both as families coming together, and actually the value of both point of view is important. And it's not even just actually that I need to see my parents when they're ill. I literally, if I want to see my parents because I love them and they're my family, we should be able to go. So this and I think that kind of conversation with Amal and her mother, I think it did kind of make me feel a little bit a kind of, I guess, a little bit sad, because actually, her mum's saying to her that, of course, I love my daughters. But then the thing is, by the same token, she's saying to her, but you're going to be married one day and then you belong to a new family. And I think maybe that responsibility maybe lies on mothers and women, that we're able to tell our daughters that actually that's not not necessarily the case, that of course you're going to a new family, but again it's this notion that actually both families are coming together, and you as a couple are then actually working and striving towards kind of a better future for children or the next generation. Did you want to add anything to that, Zoya, this sense of her conversation with Amal and her mum?
Yeah, I think because when like everyone else said, if you had to get married into another family and you miss your own, it's kind of hard that you have to stay back, whereas that everyone else said again, I think they've all covered everything. Like, men stay at home, they're allowed to stay with their family. Women have to go with their husband, and they can't really stay stay with their family.
Sure, right. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of something that, you know, I guess for the next generation, you know, maybe the more we have these conversations, it's a way of being able to break that cycle. So then coming on to the fact that obviously this story, as it says on the blurb at the back, the author says it was inspired by the story of Malala Yousafzai. And obviously we know about Malala, where she was obviously attacked by the Taliban for standing up for the rights, education rights for young girls. Now, you know, do you guys know much about the story of Malala, and is it something that inspires you, or do you think that actually, I mean, I don't know, Iman, what's your opinion on that?
I do know about the story, and it inspires me a little, but in other terms, how we already have education in UK, it is very inspiring, but it's not a story that we need to be repeated, because it would if we were in different countries where girls aren't allowed to go to school.
Sure.
But it's a really inspiring story to learn once.
Yeah, sure. But you don't think it needs to be necessarily perpetuated all the time? Okay. And how do you think actually does the media, or do, you know, certain organisations, why do you think they are constantly maybe then talking about Malala if you feel that actually is not really a need? So why do you think they're doing that?
Because they want to tell people that this country where we were born isn't like how you thought it was before. Look, Malala stood up for us, and now we have the same community as of you. You don't have to think you're better than us.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would probably add to that. Actually, I think there's some, you know, obviously everyone, I guess, has an agenda, especially when it comes to politics. And I think Malala's story was kind of slightly maybe co-opted by the West. I think the reason being she came here to obviously have the operation. She now, I think, if I remember correctly, is studying at Oxford. So I do sometimes feel that even the media, maybe in this country, uses the story as an example of how we as the West helped somebody from a different country who's a Muslim woman, and how they somehow the kind of saviour, what we call the saviour, slight saviour complex, which I think is quite problematic. But obviously what we don't want to do is, I guess, take away from obviously the nature of the story, where she, just like Amal in obviously this book, stands up to a sense of injustice. And I think that probably is the essence of it, that when you are in a position where somebody is, or you sense some injustice, you want to then obviously do something to counter that. How about yourself, Sarah? Do you feel inspired by the story of Malala, or you know, just generally about this book as well?
Malala's story was written, was based in quite an extreme situation.
Yes.
So, for example, girls were not allowed to go to school. She was going to school in secret. In Amal's story, she's allowed to go to school. She's able to go to school, but she just doesn't take it for granted. So, yeah, Malala's story is one you can look at if you feel like your education isn't worth it and you want some encouragement. Then definitely, yeah.
Sure.
But like Iman said, I don't think it needs to be repeated, because her situations were really extreme for her to get where she is. No,
exactly. Yeah, no, that's quite interesting. I've never actually thought about that, actually. That sometimes we certain people become icons for certain reasons, and then, you know, it's constantly maybe in our face a little bit. How about yourself, Zoya? Did you feel kind of inspired by the book, or even, you know, by the story of Malala Yousafzai?
Yeah, I think it... when you see that, or when you hear about the story, it makes you feel like some places aren't as lucky as like some people aren't as lucky as we are. And if something isn't right and you know it's not right, then you should stand up to it, but not like do extreme stuff.
No, exactly, sure. And what do you mean? Just unpick that. What do you mean extreme stuff like?
Extreme, like maybe like fighting for it, like if you know what I mean, like too much.
Okay, sure. No, that's fine. But again, I mean, that'd probably be part of context though, right? Because depending on what situations you're in, you might have to fight actually for your freedom and justice. But obviously it depends. Because obviously we know even now at the moment, if we look at the political scene in terms of the protests that are happening across, especially, I guess, Muslim countries, and how they're having to really stand up for their own right to even exist. I think sometimes that kind of fight for justice can be quite important. So then I guess the quote at the back of the book, which is, if everyone decided nothing could change, nothing ever would. Do you agree with that, Hannah? So if everyone decided nothing can change, nothing ever would. What does that say to you?
I agree with that nothing ever would change if...
What's that? Sorry, I missed the last bit.
Yeah, that like nothing ever would change if no one ever really done anything.
Okay, so what do you think then, Sarah? What kind of attitude do we need to have towards the world then?
It takes a lot of people to make a difference. No matter how small the difference is, you still need a lot of people. Even one person isn't going to make a big enough change to have something done about it. So you could flip around the statement as well. So like if everyone decided something could change, then there would be something that would change.
I like that.
Yes.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. I quite like that. I hadn't even thought about kind of flipping on its head, but yeah, absolutely. And actually, by that same token, I kind of think that, this thing that actually, when we sometimes, I mean, personally, when I look at the world and I think, oh my God, like sometimes the problem seems so huge that how is little me doing one thing actually going to change anything? But then I think that is important. I think if every one of us had that attitude, that even if we did something little, inshallah, it'd be able to, bring some benefit. How about yourself, Iman? So if everyone decided nothing could change, nothing ever would.
For me, that in terms of that, it at first I didn't really get what it meant, but after a little while of listening to, reading the story, then I realized that it just meant that if no one does anything about any bad things, like how if Malala didn't do anything, then nothing would change. So, yeah.
I agree to that one. So we are approaching now the end of the show. I want to thank my guests, Zoya, Iman, Hannah and Sarah, for a wonderful discussion about Amal Unbound. So definitely an inspiring story, one that I would recommend reading. I will be back in a couple of weeks with a different book and a different guest. So I hope you will join me then. Have a lovely week. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We stream our daily broadcast on inspirefm.org. You'll find all our daily updates on our social media at Inspire FM Luton.